Woke supremacy news.
Before they went in there, do you have any firsthand knowledge?
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the press today. I do have firsthand knowledge, as you know. I have been down there. I'm down there frequently. I have never seen that. I have never, ever seen that. That is not the way his office looks. Anybody that knows President Trump's office, he has guests frequently there. It's just a joke. They literally must have gone in and taken out documents they wanted, or cover letters as it is, and put it about so that the public believes that this is top secret documents that were on his floor. It's ridiculous. I can tell you personally, It's ridiculous. I've never seen that.
That is Vaughn. That is Vaughn. One of the dumbest
Justice,
things Vaughn, that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. There is literally an FBI exhibit that says 2A. Anybody that's ever seen one episode of Law and Order knows they get evidence, they put it out, they take pictures of the evidence on the floor. Everybody knows that. Is this, I'm sorry, I know you're a reporter. You can't say this. I just asked the rhetorical question. Is this really what Trump's defenders have been reduced to?
And she says that guests frequently visit that very office.
Great.
Yeah, the idea, though, that people saw this picture thinking that Donald Trump left those on the floor, of course, nobody thought that at all. Again, they're desperately trying to find anything to defend. But you're right, though. While making this stupid assertion that the FBI wanted people to think that's where he left them, which nobody thought that, she also, of course, admitted that people went into this room frequently where there were top secret documents stored.
And there's a question there that has been put out ultimately. If you're talking about Christina Bobb, Trump's lawyer, the custodian of those records there, to what extent did she actually know whether the documents had been surrendered or not? But that's where Alina Habba, the other attorney here, who's actually working on the New York Attorney General's case, so it's not quite clear what she actually knows about the documents related to the search warrant execution, related to the National Archives documents that they wanted to secure. At the same time, Alina Habba actually, I think, is also another interesting character, because she, on May 5th of this year, as part of her efforts in that New York Attorney General's case, guys, she actually signed another sworn affidavit in which she said that she went through closets, through dresser drawers, through the office desk, everything to look for relevant documents related to that Trump Organization case with the New York Attorney General's office, which suggests that she would have come into contact as an independent citizen, separate from this case, would have come into contact with these classified documents, which again hits at the very heart of the question here. Who had access to these documents? If Alina Habba, a lawyer working on a whole separate case, had access to them, and we now know that guests frequently visited his offices, who had access to these documents? And we still don't have the answer as to what these documents even pertained at this time.
All right, NBC's Vaughn Hilliard in West Palm Beach, Florida. Wow. Vaughn, thanks so much. So, Ken Delaney, and I'll let you respond. Just that stunning, pathetic argument that they strew these documents all over the floor. Donald Trump made that argument yesterday. The FBI haphazardly threw these documents all over to make it look like I stored them there. No, that's an evidence photo. We won't insult our very smart viewers by explaining that to them. They know better. But also yesterday, part of the argument in that filing from Trump's lawyers was on privacy, that Donald Trump had a right to privacy and that the FBI couldn't come in and take documents effectively that belonged to him in his private home. Of course, the documents don't belong to him. We can explain that again. Is there anything in this new filing from the Trump attorneys that says to you maybe there will be a special master, maybe the Justice Department will take another look at how they're reviewing these documents?
In the filing, no, but I think it's very possible there will be a special master. The Justice Department, after arguing that there shouldn't be one, in the last set of arguments said, and by the way, Judge, if you grant one, here are some conditions we'd like you to impose. And in fact, the Trump team agreed with some of those conditions, but the Trump team importantly, wants the special master to look at this issue of executive privilege rather than just attorney-client privilege, which would really complicate things and which most legal experts say does not exist here. Because as the Justice Department said, there's no claim of executive privilege when you're giving these documents to the executive branch. That's never been asserted. And also, as we learned in the Watergate case with Richard Nixon, a criminal investigation always trumps executive privilege, at least according to the Supreme Court. But I thought one of the most interesting things about this blustery Trump legal argument document that was filed last night. And by the way, one of the lawyers on that case, James Trusty, was the former head of the Justice Department's organized crime section. So no slouch, but this document was rather bizarre on a lot of levels. But one thing that it did try to say is that the Justice Department is seeking to criminalize what these lawyers characterized as a routine dispute between a president and the archives over presidential records. And said at one point, of course there's classified documents. They're presidential records. That's inherent in the idea of presidential records. Well, that's really interesting because, as you guys know, Donald Trump has been arguing on Truth Social, and his allies have been arguing that he declassified all these documents. That argument now seems to have gone away. They did not make that in this document last night. They're not arguing that these, as far as I can tell, that these documents were declassified, which is huge, because if they're acknowledging that they were classified, whatever they say, when Trump was the former president, he no longer had access to classified documents, period, end of story. There was no SCIF, no special room in Mar-a-Lago where those documents could have been stored. And as you guys said, they were not his documents. They were the property of the United States of America.
Yeah, and nothing routine about this, Mika. Just ask two former CIA directors, ask a war hero, ask the head of the National Security Agency how routine it is when you mishandle classified documents. And how ironic, of course, everything is, of course, for the president who went around chanting, lock her up, because of classified documents on Hillary Clinton's laptop. He mishandled classified documents, and the other generals that he had already hired for his administration, Donald Trump said they wouldn't work with him because the offense was so extreme. So it shows you, again, the hypocrisy. And also, let's just underline again the fact that Donald Trump and his lawyers are reduced to such a pathetic non-defense suggesting the FBI came in and put the evidence on the office and messed up his office and took pictures. So we would think that's how he left it. Just for Donald Trump to know, when he sees murder scenes on television and there's yellow tape there, nobody thinks the yellow tape around the body to show where the body was left by the murderer. That's what the police and the FBI do when they show up, okay?
So there's an overarching
it just doesn't work.
Problem here.
Stupid, actually.
And, the responsibility for the DOJ is if top secret classified documents were mishandled and removed from the government, from the White House, from the very safe locations that they are stored, there is a responsibility really for our allies, for even the message that is sent to our foes, that there has to be consequences if something like this had been done. And right now there's no denial that President Trump took something that was not his, that belongs to the U.S. government, to the does not belong to him.
No, but nobody's denying it.
And all the arguments, are kind of like one would perhaps surmise a way to muddle it, a way to sort of look something else, look here, look there. And there are basic questions, just basic questions that remain and really stand out here. And Fox and Friends co-host Steve Doocy had this line of questioning yesterday for the governor of South Dakota. Take a look.
Ultimately, it comes down to, why did he have all that secret stuff at Mar-a-Lago? I know his team has said that they declassified it, but that's news to the agencies that those documents belong to. And Governor, he had apparently 3 classified documents in his desk. And then the stuff, as Brian detailed on the floor, it shows 5 yellow folders marked top secret and another one that says secret SCI, which means sensitive compartmentalized information. Those are the biggest secrets in the world. Why would he, and apparently the former president went through them in January, why wouldn't he say, oh, you know what? I really need to turn that back over. Why'd he have all that stuff at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, that's why I think it's important that this is transparent and that we do have someone who's outside of the DOJ looking at this and talking to people. What is this information? We don't know what was in there. We don't know that. I believe President Trump declassified all this information. Let's find out really what the process is, what is right, what's precedent that other presidents have followed, and make sure that this is done correctly.
Governor, I don't think any president has ever carted off that many documents to their house after they left the presidency.
None have. And if they had, here's the thing. They would have been arrested. The DOJ would have gone after them. And again, there you hear, Mika, there you hear once again the argument, oh, I think he declassified it. No, as Ken pointed out, they come up with 1,000 different excuses.
That actually confirm he has them.
Each excuse confirms that the last excuse was a lie. And they keep building excuse upon excuse upon excuse that actually knocks the foundation under the previous lies that they've told.
Each excuse, Joe, confirms he never says, I didn't have these, I didn't do this. He only confirms that he has them. And he took them.
But here's his biggest problem, and I want to show another clip, but let me go to Ken Delanian first on this, because Ken actually, unlike me, Ken actually knows what he's talking about when we talk about the law. I should have paid closer attention in law school. Mika just said that he's never said that he didn't have the documents. He did, though, tell the FBI and the DOJ he didn't have any more documents. And at the end of the day, and Charlie Savage has been writing about this, I know you've been talking about it as well, this is at the heart of Donald Trump's legal jeopardy, his danger, the obstruction of justice against the DOJ. We can argue what's in these letters, whether it's love letters to Kim Jong-un, whether it's nuclear secrets, whether it's secrets about Emmanuel Macron's love life, whatever it is. Okay, we'll find out on another day. We have no idea, but we do know right now, today, according to DOJ filings, that he obstructed justice. He lied to the DOJ and said that they had turned everything back. And when they came back, they found, in this extraordinary filing you've been talking about, twice as many documents that were classified that he had turned over. They found them at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, Joe, that's 100% right. Even though you have been correctly pointing out that anyone else who took classified documents home would by now probably be under the jail. And we have plenty of examples of that in the intelligence community over the years. The real issue here, it's clear the Justice Department was treating Trump differently. It's a bottom line. I mean, that is clear from the record. They gave him every opportunity that they would not have afforded a regular citizen. And we can argue about whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. It's a fact. They first asked nicely, then they served grand jury subpoenas. But so the reason we are at this place where we had a search warrant served and this massive scandal is erupting is because the Justice Department felt they were lied to. And as you know, look, as a reporter, if I'm lied to by a government official, I'm not going to forget that. And that is going to become my top priority, is to ferret out. FBI agents and prosecutors are the same way. When they feel lied to in an investigation, that almost becomes more important than the underlying crime. It's a corruption of our system of justice. We rely on people to comply with grand jury subpoenas, and the law requires them to. And in this case, as we know, the Justice Department said they believe that there was an obstruction here, that they were misled. They haven't pointed the finger directly at Donald Trump, but who else could have done it unless we're to believe that one of his lawyers decided on their own to lie to the DOJ. In my experience, that's not how this works. I mean, lawyers, they know they're putting their license on the line when they sign an affidavit saying that something is true. And it's very likely, by the way, that the lawyer who signed that is now a witness in this case and can no longer represent Donald Trump. But so this is absolutely the crux of it now. It's not just a case about classified documents. It's a case about lying and about obstruction of justice. And that makes it, I think, a much harder decision for the Justice Department down the road as to whether they indict this case. Because you can make an argument that, look, the president was once entitled to these documents. He made some mistakes. He mishandled. Maybe we shouldn't charge him. But once you've proved that somebody lied to the DOJ, how do you walk away from that?
Yeah, and we've heard from all the reporting that Donald Trump believed that these documents were his. They belong to me. And that privacy argument we heard even last night from his attorneys. Well, Karl Rove was talking about that last night on Fox News. Here's what he said.
That's its own situation that the DOJ is investigating, and the Trump side has their lawyers and their feelings about what was rightfully his and able to take. But it's just interesting.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear on this. None of these government documents are his to have taken. I agree with the deputy director who said that a lot of the former president's problems are of his own creation. You can, under the Presidential Records Act of 1978, you cannot take original documents out of the White House with you when you leave the White House, whether you're the president of the United States or any of his aides. No, it's verboten under the law. Now, there are no criminal penalties for violating it, but why the former president packed up 20, nearly 30 some odd boxes of material when he had no right to do so? And that's what the government asserts, incidentally, in this filing. They say the former president asked for the return of the documents because, as he said in his filing, they were created during his administration, and the response of the government, in their filing was that's evidence that they aren't his. If they were developed in the White House during his time of presidency under the Presidential Records Act, they belong to the government, not to him.
Well, there it is, Joe. I mean, this is so clear cut that there are people who have defended Trump a lot in the last several years who just can't do it on this because it's so plain that he cannot have those documents in his house. And we showed Steve Doocy earlier. He was not only in the clip we showed, but explaining to his co-host yesterday, you just can't have top secret documents in the top drawer of your desk at Mar-a-Lago. So this is breaking through in places where some other stories about Donald Trump have not.
I mean, everybody knows it. Everybody knows he can't have those documents. And Jonathan Lemire, you've spent a lot of time covering Donald Trump. You've written a book about him. You've written the book on the big lie. Meek and I obviously knew him for a decade before he was even ran for office. And it would be easy for people who knew Trump to say, well, the guy's just so arrogant and he's just so self-centered that he thinks if he created these documents inside the White House, then he could take them home. And so I guess that would be an argument, but for the fact, and I keep going back to this point, that I know Trump's lawyers understand is his biggest legal challenge now, except for the fact that if that had been it, he could have had that fight, said, yes, I have all of these documents, they're mine, I created it, I disagree with a law that I signed, I disagreed with a law that I signed and made actually penalties even tougher for people who mishandle classified documents, which is a side note we don't even talk about enough. But for the fact that the FBI and the DOJ said, after they got some documents back, after begging him to return the documents for months, is that it? Are those other documents you have? And Trump and his lawyers said, yeah, that's all we have. That's all we have. And so then they had people inside the joint at Mar-a-Lago telling the FBI that they were being lied to by Donald Trump. They go in and they find twice as many classified documents. They find them inside, more than the amount they had originally had returned. And so you can't even put this off to Donald Trump's arrogance, saying he thought the documents were his, because you have the lie that he had returned all the documents. And of course, that has obstruction of justice. It just screams obstruction of justice. And that, at the end of the day, is his biggest legal challenge.
Yeah, and it's not just that Trump signed a bill to make the penalties tougher for people mishandling classified information. Let's recall, of course, that the entire 2016 campaign was about that, with Trump denouncing Hillary Clinton's efforts at doing the same. I mean, you're right in that Trump's arrogance could have been, frankly, a possible plausible defense for part of this. Those of us who have spent time with Trump, who have covered Trump, all who have spent time at his properties, know that he is a pack rat, that he grabs souvenirs. He likes to put things up on the wall, sometimes even fake magazine covers, that he likes to show off to guests. I've said on the show before, I was part of a group of reporters that he at one point brought into the Oval Office and was showing off the Kim Jong-un letters, documents that we should not have been seeing, ones the National Archives has retrieved, and that the problem he's now in are the shifting explanations and the shifting lies. The fact that he and his attorney, some who are going to have to recuse themselves from the case because they themselves could be in legal trouble, have not been able to get their stories straight, because the approach that he used as president, in terms of just throwing things up against the wall, various excuses, various explanations, hoping one would fix, that might work in a political context. You might get one or two of those to break through on Fox News, in the conservative media, and be amplified to muddy the waters. That doesn't work in the legal context. In fact, that only makes it more, with the cover letters saying top secret or classified. If he had declassified them, that would have been marked on the cover. It would now say declassified. That stamp would have been there. Of course, we're not seeing any of that. So it is his lies and shifting stories that have previously got him out of political trouble. This time has only increased his legal jeopardy.
Yeah, and more confirmation. Willie, we've shown a clip of Karl Rove. We've shown a clip of Steve Doocy, just clearly saying what he's done is improper. I talked about earlier this week Ben Shapiro and Brit Hume telling Republicans, if you want to win the election, you need to put Donald Trump in your rearview mirror. We have Andrew McCarthy this morning talking about how this is a serious obstruction case for the reasons that I just pointed out, that would not be difficult to prove, and suggesting that in the New York Post, suggesting that the DOJ, if not a slam dunk, pretty close to having a slam dunk case of obstruction that they could easily prove against Donald Trump now. And in the Washington Times, another very conservative publication, is the headline, "Why Donald Trump Will Soon Be Indicted." And it's by Andrew Napolitano. It gives me no joy to write this piece. Even a cursory review of the redacted version of the affidavit submitted in support of the government's application reveals that he will soon be indicted by a federal grand jury for 3 crimes: removing and concealing national defense information and giving NDI to those not legally entitled to possess it, and obstruction of justice by failing to return NDI to those who are legally entitled to retrieve it, which, again, just if you're keeping score at home, that's Fox News, the New York Post, and the Washington Times. 3 of the fiercest pro-Trump media outlets, all publishing pieces, are talking about how Donald Trump, first of all, had no right to have these documents, and secondly, that he's going to be indicted for obstruction at the very least.
Well, because this is undeniable. That photograph we've been showing is a crime scene, effectively. And just based on what the Justice Department has pushed out into public, what we know publicly, leads a lot of people to wonder how Merrick Garland could not indict the former president. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I know we're going to talk about this, Joe, but speaking of those publications, the Wall Street Journal just crossed with a new poll that perhaps shows the heavy implications of this politically on Donald Trump. We're seeing big numbers up for Joe Biden, widening his margin in a potential head-to-head with Donald Trump, and independents swinging massively toward Democrats right now.